It was the year 1976. Our small village lay wrapped in silence beneath the weight of countless rumors, all revolving around one house. A crumbling, two-storied building stood at the end of a deserted lane, surrounded by tall, dying trees, whose branches scratched the windows like skeletal hands whenever the wind blew. No one went near it after sunset. People called it the cursed house. Everyone had a story about it. Every old man, every tea stall owner, every frightened child who dared to walk too close. Some said that on certain nights, they could hear a woman singing softly, her voice echoing through the walls, though the house had been locked for years. Others swore they'd seen a man hanging by a rope from the ceiling, swaying gently even when there was no breeze. And then there were those who spoke of a giant figure, 15, maybe 17 feet tall, walking slowly across the roof under the moonlight. The house had been empty for over a decade. Its owners lived far away now, unwilling to return. The place had become an eyesore, yet somehow it felt alive, as if it breathed through the cracks of its walls. Some nights, faint whispers floated down the road, and dogs howled facing the gate, but never dared to enter. Still, not everyone believed the tales. The owners, tired of hearing ghost stories about their property, decided that perhaps it was all superstition, foolish talk of villagers who had nothing better to do. They thought, if someone stays there for a few nights and proves nothing happens, people will stop spreading these stories. So, they found two men bold, curious, and poor enough to take the risk for a small payment. Both laughed when they heard about the haunted house. Ghosts? One of them joked. If I see one, I'll charge rent from it too. They arrived one afternoon, carrying a lantern, some food, and a blanket. The air around the house felt different, heavy, stale, and cold. As they stepped inside, dust rose in thick clouds, and every footstep echoed like a whisper in the dark. The room smelled of rust and something else, something faintly metallic, almost like blood that had dried long ago. They explored every room, broken furniture, cobwebs that hung like curtains, paint peeled off the walls, revealing strange, dark stains beneath. One of them ran his fingers along the marks and frowned. "Looks like old water damage," he said. But it wasn't. When night fell, the silence grew heavier. The air no longer felt still, it felt watchful. The flame of their lantern flickered for no reason. At times, one of them thought he heard faint footsteps upstairs, but when they went to check, there was nothing, only shadows moving where the light didn't reach. Hours passed. Midnight came. The house groaned as if it remembered pain. One of the men tried to sleep, but the other stayed awake, listening. The ticking of his pocket watch sounded too loud, too slow. From somewhere deep within the walls, there came a sound, faint and broken, like someone humming an old, sad tune. He turned toward his friend. "Did you hear that?" The other man didn't answer. He was already half asleep. Outside, a dog barked once, then stopped abruptly, as if silenced. And in that suffocating quiet, the house seemed to breathe again. That was their first night, and nothing truly happened. But sometimes, the silence before the storm is the loudest warning of all. The second night came colder, heavier, darker. The two men, Rahim and Kabir, had survived the first night without anything more than the creak of old wood and the distant cry of dogs. They laughed about it in the morning. "See? Just stories," Kabir said, lighting a cigarette. "The ghosts must have gone on vacation." Rahim forced a smile, yet deep down, something in him felt uneasy. All through the night before, he had heard things, faint noises like whispers crawling behind the walls, a woman's humming, and footsteps that always seemed one room behind him. But every time he looked, there was nothing. By sunset, the house looked even more sinister. The dying light turned the broken windows into black mouths gaping wide, and the long corridor seemed to stretch endlessly. The two men lit their lantern early. "Let's stay awake tonight," Rahim said. Kabir grinned. "Fine. If the ghosts come, we'll serve them tea." They set up their bedrolls in the main hall. The air smelled damp, heavy with decay. Somewhere inside, a door creaked open by itself. Kabir went to check, but found nothing, only the faint sway of a curtain, though there was no wind. Midnight crawled in like a shadow. The clock in Rahim's pocket ticked softly, each second echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. Then, slowly, the house began to stir. It started with a sound, faint, rhythmic, as if someone was walking upstairs. Kabir looked up, annoyed. "Probably rats," he muttered, but Rahim shook his head. The footsteps were too heavy, too slow, too deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. Each step sounded closer, but when they looked, the ceiling above was still. The lamp flickered, the flame bending sideways as if something unseen had passed by. Suddenly, from the next room, came a soft sobbing sound. A woman's cry, fragile and distant. Both froze. Kabir whispered, "You heard that, didn't you?" Rahim nodded slowly, his eyes wide. They followed the sound to the old storeroom. The door was slightly open. Inside, darkness pulled like ink. The sobbing stopped the moment they stepped in. Then came a whisper, right between them. "Why did you come here?" Both men spun around, but there was no one. The lantern shook in Rahim's trembling hand. They hurried back to the hall and locked the door. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Kabir forced a laugh, though his voice trembled. "It's just the wind, Rahim. Just the wind." But they both knew there had been no wind. An hour passed. 2. Kabir eventually laid down, pretending to sleep. Rahim stayed awake, staring at the door. The flame of the lantern had burned low, its light barely holding back the dark. At around 3:15 am, Rahim's eyes fluttered shut. He didn't mean to sleep, but exhaustion took him. When he woke, the lantern was out. The room was pitch black, and Kabir was gone. He called his friend's name softly at first. No reply. Louder still, nothing. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Rahim saw something move near the corner. A shadow slithered across the floor. Long, silent, unnatural. He took a cautious step forward and froze. The ground around his feet was moving, not the floor, the things on it. He lifted the lantern and struck a match. In the brief flicker of light, his breath stopped. The entire floor was covered in snakes, hundreds of them, twisting, coiling, hissing silently, as if the whole house was alive and breathing through them. Rahim stumbled backward, his scream caught in his throat. The match fell and went out. He turned toward the door and shouted, "Kabir, where are you?" From above came a muffled voice. "Rahim, I'm here." He looked up. The voice was coming from the roof. Trembling, Rahim climbed the narrow staircase, every step echoing in the hollow house. The door to the roof creaked open. Cold air rushed in, and then he saw it. Kabir was sitting on the rooftop, bare-chested, his skin pale as ash. All around him, bats hung upside down, fluttering their wings, shrieking into the night. Kabir turned his head slowly. His eyes were open wide, unblinking, but his face was blank, emotionless. Rahim whispered in terror, "Kabir, what are you doing?" Kabir didn't speak, but all the bats did together a deafening, inhuman screech that pierced the night and shook the air. And in that moment, Rahim realized the house was no longer just haunted, it was alive. The night tore itself open with the sound of bats, hundreds of them. Their wings slapped the cold air as they swirled around the rooftop like a black storm. Rahim stumbled backward, his heart hammering inside his chest. The air smelled of rot and iron. Kabir sat motionless under the moonlight, surrounded by shrieking creatures that clawed at the sky. "Kabir," Rahim shouted, his voice trembling. "Come down, brother. What are you doing?" No answer. Kabir's eyes were fixed on something far beyond Rahim, something unseen, something inside the darkness itself. His mouth opened slowly, and for a moment Rahim thought he would speak. Instead, a low, broken humming came out. The same tune Rahim had heard last night. That soft, sorrowful voice that had floated through the walls. Rahim felt his blood turn cold. That wasn't Kabir's voice. Then, as if the house itself responded, a window downstairs slammed shut hard enough to rattle the whole building. Another door followed, then another. Each bang echoed through the walls like thunder until it felt like the house was closing in on him. He turned and ran downstairs, his bare feet slipping on the dusty steps. "Enough," he gasped. "I'm leaving. I don't care what's in this place, I'm leaving." But when he reached the front door, it wouldn't move. The latch was gone. He tried to pull it open with both hands, but it felt like someone on the other side was holding it shut. Pushing back, "Open it!" he screamed. "Who's there?" No response. Only the creaking sound of wood. Like laughter. Then came the crying again. That same faint, feminine sob. But this time, it was closer. It wasn't upstairs. It was coming from inside the hall. Rahim turned around slowly. The lantern had gone out. Yet there was light. Faint, bluish seeping out from the cracks of the inner room. The crying grew louder. His breath came in short bursts, his body trembling. Still, something pulled him forward, a strange, irresistible urge to look. He stepped into the room. There was no one there. Just old furniture covered with torn white sheets. The light seemed to come from beneath one of them. He hesitated, then reached out and pulled the sheet away. Underneath was an old mirror, cracked, covered in dust, yet faintly glowing from within. The reflection was dim. The room behind him, the doorway, and then something else. A figure standing right behind him. Rahim froze. His throat tightened. Slowly, he turned his head. Nothing. He looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there. A tall, thin woman in a white sari, her face hidden by long black hair. Her feet weren't touching the ground. And then she moved. The mirror rippled like water. The woman's head tilted to the side, and through the crack in the glass, Rahim saw her eyes empty. Black holes that seemed to pull the world inside them. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The mirror shattered. A cold wind burst through the room, extinguishing every bit of light. Rahim screamed. The sobbing turned to laughter, deep, broken, echoing off the walls. From above, he could hear Kabir still humming the same endless tune, over and over, until it no longer sounded human. Rahim ran to the door again and pulled with all his strength. It still wouldn't open. He kicked it, slammed it, cursed at nothing. Then suddenly clicked. The door creaked open by itself. He didn't think twice. He rushed out into the courtyard, barefoot, gasping for air. The night was still. The moon had disappeared behind the clouds. The trees around the house stood motionless, as if even the wind had stopped breathing. Rahim turned back just once, and saw the rooftop. Kabir was still there, but now, there were more figures standing behind him, tall, silent shapes, dozens of them all staring down at Rahim with hollow, shining eyes. The bats had gone quiet. The whole world had gone quiet. And from somewhere deep inside the house came a final whisper, soft and cold. "You shouldn't have stayed." Rahim ran into the darkness, never looking back. But the next morning, the villagers found both men's belongings inside the house: the lantern, the blanket, the cigarette tin, and the marks of 2 pairs of bare feet in the dust, leading up the stairs, and only 1 pair coming back down. The next morning, when Rahim didn't return to the village, the owner grew uneasy. By afternoon, word had already spread. The villagers were whispering that the house had taken them. A small group of men gathered near the gate, too afraid to go inside. One of them claimed he'd heard screams around him. Another said he saw shadows moving behind the windows, though the house was supposed to be empty. No one dared to check. By evening, the owner sent 2 new men, stronger, braver, armed with courage and disbelief. Their names were Jalal and Hasib. They didn't believe in ghosts. They believed in truth. "People imagine things," Jalal said. "We'll stay one night, prove it's nonsense, and be done." The sky was gray when they reached the house. The heavy wooden door stood slightly open, creaking with every breath of wind, as if it had been expecting them. The inside smelled of damp dust and something burnt. They noticed a shattered mirror on the floor, the surface blackened and cold. They didn't know it had been Rahim's last moment reflected there. "Strange," Hasib murmured. "It's colder inside than outside." Jalal nodded, tightening his scarf. "Let's check every room before dark." They moved through the corridors. Every sound echoed endlessly. The crunch of their steps, the creak of hinges, even the rustle of their own clothes sounded too loud. In one of the rooms, they found a lantern, a cigarette tin, and a blanket, all covered in dust, as if they had been lying there for years instead of a single day. Jalal frowned. They left these behind? As night came, the air thickened. The smell of something rotten began to rise, faint but steady, like the stench of old meat hidden behind walls. They lit their lantern and settled near the main hall. "Remember," Jalal said, forcing a smile. No ghosts, just rats and wind. But Hasib's voice was uneasy. Then why does it feel like something's breathing in here? The flame of the lantern flickered violently once, twice, and then stood still. Somewhere above them, footsteps started again. Slow, dragging, deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. Hasib looked up. Maybe someone's there. Jalal grabbed a stick. Let's see. They climbed the stairs together, the old wood groaning beneath their weight. At the top, a long hallway stretched before them, dark, endless. The footsteps stopped. Hello, Jalal called out. His voice echoed, then faded. No reply. They moved closer to the first door. From inside came the faint sound of chains clinking, metal rubbing against metal. Hasib whispered, "Who would keep chains here?" Jalal reached for the handle. The door opened with a low moan. Inside, darkness. A smell so foul it made them both gag. They raised the lantern and froze. The room was empty, except for the rope hanging from the ceiling. It swayed gently, though there was no wind. Beneath it lay deep scratches on the floor, marks like someone had tried to run while being dragged back. Jalal turned pale. "Let's go downstairs." As they stepped out, the door slammed shut behind them. Bang! They jumped, the lantern shaking in Hasib's hand. The sound of running footsteps erupted in the hallway, fast, furious, coming from both directions at once. The men backed into each other, terrified. Then everything stopped. Silence. And then, a woman's laughter. Soft, sweet, terribly close. "Who's there?" Jalal shouted. No answer, but when they turned around, Hasib gasped. On the wall beside them, handprints had appeared, dozens of them black and dripping, as if someone had pressed blood-soaked hands against the plaster. The prints began to slide downward, leaving trails as if the wall itself were bleeding. The lantern flickered, the light dimmed. In the darkness, something moved. A figure crouched in the far corner watching. "Jalal," Hasib whispered, his voice trembling. "Someone's there." The thing moved closer, crawling, bones cracking, joints bending backward, its limbs too long for a human body. The faint light revealed its face, or what was left of it, a half-decayed woman with empty eyes and a twisted smile. Her neck tilted unnaturally as she whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." They never left. The lantern burst and went out. The men screamed, doors banged, chains rattled, windows shattered. The whole house roared like it was alive. Outside, villagers saw the faint orange flicker of fire through the cracks and heard the echo of those screams that didn't sound entirely human. By dawn, the house was silent again. When they entered later that day, they found both men lying near the main hall, their faces pale, mouths open in frozen horror, eyes wide and staring at the ceiling. There wasn't a single wound on their bodies. It looked like they had died of pure, unfiltered fear. And on the wall behind them, written in something dark and wet, were 5 words. "The house has awakened again." The sun rose over the village that morning, but the air was wrong. Too still, too quiet. Even the birds refused to sing. When the villagers finally gathered the courage to step into the haunted house, what they found turned their blood cold. Jalal and Hasib lay in the center of the hall, eyes wide open, their faces frozen in an expression of terror so deep it didn't look human anymore. There was no wound, no sign of struggle, just 2 men who seemed to have seen something they should never have seen. The smell of death hung in the air, mixed with the sharp scent of burnt wood and rust. The shattered lanterns, the broken rope, and the trail of black handprints still stained the walls. But no one dared to touch anything. An old villager whispered, "They didn't die alone. The house took them." By noon, the owner arrived, pale, trembling, unable to believe what he was seeing. He knelt beside the dead men, shaking his head in disbelief. "It can't be true. It can't." But when he looked up, he noticed something carved onto the wall above the bodies, something that hadn't been there before. It was a sentence, written in jagged, uneven lines. "You were told not to return." No one knew who had written it. That same evening, the owner ordered the house to be locked forever. The doors were nailed shut, the windows boarded, and the path leading to it overgrown with thorns and weeds. Within weeks, people avoided even walking past it after dark. But some nights, when the wind blew from that direction, The villagers said they could still hear faint sounds, a woman crying softly, a man's scream fading into silence, or the slow, heavy footsteps of someone walking across the rooftop. Years passed. The house rotted and sank deeper into the earth. Children grew up hearing the story, the tale of the cursed house that killed anyone who dared to live in it. No one ever went near it again. And yet, even now, when the moon is full and the air turns cold, those who pass by the old lane say the same thing. They see a light flicker in the upstairs window. They hear the whisper of a woman's voice. And sometimes, just for a moment, they see a tall shadow standing on the roof, still waiting. Because that house was never just haunted, it was hungry, and hunger never dies. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream.